Welcome back to the channel folks, and to one of a series of videos on how to paint bolt action. And before I get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to Overlord Games, who supplied all the sprues for this series so far. They're friends of the channel and they support the events that we help to run, and if you want to check them out yourself, you can find them in a link in the description below. In the tutorials, I'm going to be following my usual layering approach, which is all about getting a high contrast bright finish for the figure so that it really stands out well on the tabletop. I hope you'll find this series interesting and useful and give you a few ideas for your own painting. Don't forget to check out the playlist on the channel for painting bolt action, where you'll find these tutorials and many others. For each guide, you will find a list of the paints that I used in the description, and if you've got any questions, just stick them down in the comments and I will get back to you. Looking for help in painting your wargame collection? Well, here at Panzerschüler we have 15 years experience in offering commission painting services. So if you have a project in mind and you'd like to discuss it with us, then get in touch at the email address you'll see on screen just now. Our schedule is always busy, but we're always looking for new customers. We paint full time, which means when we start your project, we're 100% committed to that project and won't start another one until it's done. Our clients can be found all over the world, so we're very experienced in making sure that your completed project is properly packed and safely sent on. If you would like to know more, get in touch by email, give us some details of the project that you're planning, and we'll get back to you with a quote and potential indication of timescales. Thank you for your time. Now let's get back to this painting tutorial. In this guide we're going back to an American subject, this being the later version of the US para uniform. This is quite a simple figure compared to other figures that we might be painting and that you'll see as part of this series, because they don't carry a lot of equipment, and what they do carry is pretty much all of the same colour. I've begun by giving an overall shade coat of olive brown, and then I'm going to start to layer up from there using US dark green. As is often the case with this layering approach, because we're starting from a dark base and we're using a dark colour in this case, things will look quite dark as we go, but believe me, it will brighten up as we add more layers to it. I'm going to be applying the US dark green in two passes, or two coats perhaps. The first coat being a mapping out process where I work my way around the figure and I catch all of the highlighted areas, leaving olive brown in all the areas that will remain shaded. But this is just the first pass, the mapping out, that will allow me in the next stage to refine everything and get a nice solid opaque coat of paint down. This is the most time consuming part of painting a one colour uniform such as this, but things will now move on much more quickly as we have most of the paint down for the uniform already. And here you see me doing the second pass, where I'm going in with the same colour again, the US dark green, and starting to refine the mapping process. So by that I mean I'm going to first of all put another layer of paint down so it's nice and opaque, but I'm also going to be cutting into the shade, the olive brown that I left behind in the mapping process, because we do not want to leave too much of that shade. It is just an accent to give depth and shape. It's not a main colour and you don't want it to dominate. So you have to be careful when you're doing this. Look at what you've done after you've done the second pass. If it needs a bit more work, then just go back and work those individual areas. And note where I've been leaving the shade so that you can define the shapes of pockets, collars, cuffs, so that you can see where the folds are in the uniform, where the shoulder meets the arm and such likes. And it's going to be the contrast between this deep shade and the highlight that we're going to apply next that's going to add the depth and shape to the finished look and really make it pop on the tabletop at tabletop distance. The highlight colour I'm going to be using is green grey. It's a colour which works great for highlighting all sorts of greens because it lightens the edges, but it doesn't brighten the edges. It's not like a sort of neon brightening. It's simply a lighter edge, which works a treat for what we're after here. As you can see, I'm using a small thin brush, one with a good point on it, that will allow me to, in one pass, get that line down. We don't want to be making multiple passes here, so the paint consistency has to be right. You want something which will cover in one pass, but it's not going to be too dry. If it is too dry, it will drag across the surface and you won't get a smooth line. It will be very lumpy, very uneven. And if it's too wet, not only will you have to make another pass, which will present lots of difficulties, you'll also see the paint slightly just spreading out on the surface, which gives us a softer finish. And we're not after that for this look. We're after high contrast, sharp lines between the dark and the light areas, creating depth that way. And in that respect, you'll get the deepest contrast where you're able to place the highlight line directly beside the shade. It's not always going to be possible, but in areas such as pockets and cuffs, where the shoulder beats the arm and such likes, you'll be able to do that, and that will really help define all these important areas of the uniform, really help it give shape. So having completed the uniform, it's time now to move on to the various packs that the figure is carrying. Now the colours I'm going to be using for this work better with a shade coat of German Camo black brown. So I'm going to first of all repaint all those areas with a very thin coat of that. It's already got a nice shade to it already with the olive brown, so a thin coat of German Camo black brown, and then I'm going to start my first layer, which is US Field Drab. As before, we have to be very careful with the level of German Camo black brown that we are leaving. It has to be a tiny little amount just to give the shape to the bags. It will really help them define their shape against the background of the figure. And once again, this layer here, we're going to take 2 passes to get the level of opacity that we need, to get the smooth finish that we need, and to really map in that shading. I'm now going to move to old wood, and old wood is going to be the main layer for the packs. So the US Field Drab is going to become a shade. So I'm going to be cutting into that in the same way as I would with the German Camo black brown, maybe leaving just a little bit more than that really dark colour. But the idea here is that I'm going to have a bit more of a transition because I'm using a lighter colour, going to have 3 layers over the deep shade layer of German Camo black brown. And remember, be consistent, do this in 2 passes. The areas are very small, so it's not going to be a lot of extra work. But if you do one pass to help map it out, another pass to help define everything. And then we're going to carefully paint some fine highlights on with Iraqi sand. Now on features like this, the highlight is very much like a lining process. We're going to be defining the exterior shape of the packs, so it'll stand out strongly against the background of the figure, including of course where we've already got that shade colour in to help, and then the internal shapes such as the flaps and the straps and such likes. And when you have well painted elements such as this against the larger elements of the figure itself, it really helps just bring everything into focus and help the shape get defined and stand out on the tabletop. Now for the black, grey and metallic areas, and in this case it's really mostly on the weapon, and I've given them a coat of black to begin with as a deep shade. It helps it stand out strongly. If you're painting in greys and such like, if you have a black external shade, a black edge to things. And then I'm going to be painting a nice solid layer of German grey as the main metal colour on the weapon. It's dark enough, but it's still got a bit of a metallic look because of the greyness. Then to highlight that, I'm going to very carefully apply some highlights with London grey. Any other similar light grey will do, just don't make it too light. And this is very much like edge lining, where I'm just going to be hitting those edges. It's well defined, it's got lots of external 90-degree angles. So carefully map that out, and that'll really help the metallic areas of the gun pop and give it greater definition. Now for the leather straps and for the boots, I'm going to be using leather brown. I've used a shade coat of German Camo black brown on the boots, but you can see on the helmet there, I've just left the olive brown in place because the strap's such a small thing, it won't matter too much there. And I'm going to be using leather brown for the strap on the Thompson. Just bear in mind too, on things such as the strap, there's also little buckles, and we want to pay attention to them individually just to help catch all the detail, once again give it a bit more shape. And then as a highlight, I'm going to be using new wood. If you have very small leather items, such as a very small leather strap, you might want to go a little bit brighter on the highlight, such as orange brine, but only for those really small items that need a bit more help to pop against the background of the figure, more contrast. Now for the wooden stocks on the weapons, I tend not to go too dark because I want them to stand out more strongly. You can use darker colours if you wish, but you may find that the weapon just becomes a little bit bland and just disappears into the background. But I start with a shade coat of flat earth to begin with, and then the main colour, the main coat, is going to be new wood. Now we're going to go on to the helmet. We're going to be using a technique here similar to dry brushing, but we're not going to be using a dry brush, if that makes sense. We've got an olive brown shade coat on the helmet already, which is fine, that's what we need. And then I'm going to use the edge of my brush to pass over the raised surfaces of the helmet here. It's quite a heavy pass. The brush itself has wet paint on it, not dry paint on it. We're not looking for a dusty look here. We're just trying to quickly catch all of the raised areas, leaving some of the shade colour there. Not worried about it being absolutely perfect because it's quite a messy thing all over, as you'll see. Having got the basic olive drab colour down now, we need to paint the camo net, which is going to be similar to what we did, but we're going to use a bit more control. And we're going to start with German Camo Black Brown because I need to create light and dark in the camo net for it to stand out against the background of the olive drab helmet. Then I'm going to take some new wood and I'm going to start bouncing the brush. That's the best way of describing it, just bouncing it across the surface. This is not a dry brush once again. The paint is wet enough so that it will attach to the surface for every bounce, and I'm going to start picking out all of the raised areas. It's not going to be an absolute complete coverage over the surface, but overall it will give you the look of a bit of netting, and it's actually quite a quick way of doing something that looks very detailed and, you know, maybe even a little bit obscure about how you would tackle this. Now on to the eyes, the thing that we all love to paint the most. First of all, you can see I've put my shade coat down, which is saddle brown. Then I'm going to paint the eyes in, so if we make any mistakes we can easily fix the shade coat around it and move on to the skin. I use an off-white colour and I tend to come in from the side, you know, because the eyes are basically elongated, and just paint two little lines. And then it's German Camo Black Brown for the pupils, just tiny line drawn through the centre of the eye. You've got a black dark point on your brush here and a white background on the little eye slits, so you can line it up and then a quick line straight through it, tidy up with saddle brown as required. Then for the skin, I'm going to be using Flesh Base from Panzeraces, and I'm going to start basically in a very similar way to how you would paint the uniform. Imagine you were painting pockets and so on. The shape is there for you, it's already sculpted in. Just start picking things out. So on the hand you've got fingers, you've got possibly the palm if it's opened. Just look at your own palm and you can see how you've got like your thumb. You've got the area just to the side of the thumb, and then the area across beneath the fingers, and those three main areas. In the back of the hand you have got the tendons. They're the most obvious things on the back of the hand. When it comes to the face, I typically start by painting a nose, then lips, chin, eyebrows, cheeks, map those areas out, and then refine everything when you go through with a second pass, and then you'll start to get these nice, easily definable and, more importantly, recognisable facial and hand features that really stand out on the tabletop. And then as a highlight I use flat flesh, but just like with every other highlight you've got to be careful here. We don't want this to become a dominant colour, it is just a highlight. So we'll be picking out knuckles, the ends of fingers, a little bit along the backs of the hands, and on the face, thin lines across the nose, lips, chin, underneath the eyes. Not on top of the eyes, underneath the eyes. It stands out a little bit better. Down the side of the face, you know, where the cheeks meet the lips. And painting the skin is always the end of the project for me, and it is also the end of this video, so hopefully you have enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out Overlord Games in the description below, and the playlist for the bolt action painting tutorials. You'll find that on the channel. Lots and lots of subjects in there, folks, for you. So thanks for watching, and if you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing. If you'd like to subscribe and hit the bell button, that'll mean we'll definitely see you all on the next one.